Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 284. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Jacob from Jackpot Boxing, Daniel from the Inscriber. He will be joining us shortly. Unfortunately, this evening we probably will not have Gail on here. Uh, for those who don't know, not only does she write about boxing and stuff, or write about boxing, excuse me, she also teaches media on the side, so she has a couple of engagements in regards to that. So it's a probability that she will not be able to make it with us tonight or this evening. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the best place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. You check the top right of the blog page, you'll find links to where to find us on social media, links to where to find us on social media, where to find us on RSS feeds that carry podcasts. Bit of a note here. I'm changing podcast host. So when you look up Pound for Pound Box Report, check out the one with the Anchor logo. I'm switching over to Anchor. So for the time being, so when you look up the show on iTunes or Google Play Music, Spotify, and the like, check for the Pound for Pound Box Report logo with a Anchor logo. And bit of a forewarning here. I'm working behind the scenes to update some things, and that update includes changing the logo of the show. So coming soon, you'll have a new logo for Pound for Pound Box Report, be it on the podcast format, be it on YouTube. You can also on the blog page check out where you can donate, and also check out links to my online fitness coaching page. I see Daniel from the Inscriber has joined us. So let's get things going. Recapping things this weekend. Want to focus specifically on the fights that took place um, on the zone in Frisco, Texas, this past weekend, this past Saturday on the 29th of February. Uh, I'm not going to go with the headliner first, being Mikey Garcia and Jessie Vargas. Why? Because I think of that card, the headliner, the main event, I should say, was the weakest fight on that card, in my opinion. I want to go to uh, and a very intriguing bout we talked about last week between Yafai and Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. Uh, the reason I named this episode "The Return to Glory" is because we kind of hinted at this last week that if Chocolatito had the form if he still had a little bit, had something in him that resembled anything pre Sri Sakat Rungwasai, he would defeat Cal Yafai, and he did just that. I'm going to you first, Jacob, and two things here. First of all, you have to applaud Roman Gonzalez for what he did. He stopped Yafai intent to win the WBA super flyweight title. Um, at times, it was vintage Chocolatito. I tweeted that he has a PhD in insight fighting, as once he got comfortable in there, he ripped Yafai up with body shots and whatnot. But at the same time, Jacob, in my opinion, Yafai fought a very unintelligent fight. Um, it's like he watched the two fights between Chocolatito and Rungwasai and figured that because he's the quote unquote naturally bigger guy, that he could just stand in there and virtually wear down and wear out Gonzalez. And problem is he doesn't have the power of Rungwasai to do that. And he played right into Chocolatito's hands for most of this fight. Who do you give more credit to? Who do you give Roman credit for what he did in eventually beating up Yafai, or do you kind of put kind of a bit of an asterisk, for lack of a better word, because of the style that Yafai chose to employ in this fight?
No, I had picked Chocolatito to win this fight. I think unfortunately, a lot of people wrote him off because he got knocked out in devastating fashion, and unfortunately I was there for that fight. Um, that was here on the West Coast, but he lost the first fight between Rungvisai. I actually thought he won that fight. It was a good competitive fight, but I thought he won that fight, but he didn't get the decision. In the second fight, he obviously got blown out. But Rungvisai is a very, very, very good fighter. He's not. It's not like he lost to a slouch. He lost to a guy that was on the come up and at the top of the game, and who eventually became the champion and defeated Estrada, and recently lost, but he's still one of the top guys, and he's on my pound for pound list still, even with the last loss to Estrada. So I think a lot of people wrote him off, and I think it's something that you shouldn't do to fighters. He's been around for a while, and he took some damage, but to me, you kind of see in the following fights if he still has it, and he's had some, he had a contender of knockout of the year. I think it was, I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year, but anyway, I give him full credit because I think everybody thought that Yafai was going to come in and use movement and distance and his legs, and so I'm sure that's probably what Roman prepared for. But to Roman's credit, he he's a great inside fighter. He uses both attacks of the body and the head, a lot of combinations, throws a lot of volume, but he was able to deal with the size of the Yafai, because Chocolatito hasn't been the same, since he's moved up. I think he's better served at the lower weights, or that's where he was prime. But he stood up to him, and he was patient, and you know it's not his fault that this other guy had a bad game plan. He did what he had to do, and he finished the fight, which is the most important part. Is that he had his guy hurt, and he went for the kill. Yafai, I think you're right. He probably thought that watching Rungvisai, who was also a big superfly weight, he saw what he did, and maybe he thought he could do something else too, and maybe he wrote off Chocolatito as an old, kind of passing of the guard, veteran. But it was a really good fight. It was entertaining, and I'm glad Chocolatito's back, and I mean, I guess back in the graces of everyone else, and I'm hope to see a second fight with him in Estrada, or I wouldn't even mind seeing him against Rungvisai again, just to see you know if Rungvisai has his number or what. But like I said, I thought he won the first fight, and in the second fight he just got caught with a really, really good shot. But I think he can definitely, he still has it. He's not as good as he used to be, but he can definitely mix it up at the top of the division.
Sorry, I was on mute. Shout out to official scorecard boxing science. Shout out to Bronze Plumber in the live YouTube chat. Plumber says lane performance from Cal. Hard to measure Choco's return to eliteness from that. We'll talk about that, whether he is back at that elite level. I'll go to Daniel. Your reaction to what you saw. Um, I pose the same question to you. Do you give credit to Chocolatito for what he did ultimately, or are you side eyeing Cal Yafai a bit for how he fought?
Um, I said it last week. I pretty much consider Yafai to be, to me, in the same deal as Lee Selby. Somebody that has talent, but doesn't really, to me, have enough to actually be a double or a long-term champion. They just happen to get lucky with a belt, which is, like I said, that's how I felt Yafai. That's how I felt about Selby. Now, but the onus was on Chocolatito. He had to show that not only was he ready to take a title fight, but he was willing to do what he had to do to be caught. And that's what he did. It took him a little bit, took him a couple of rounds, but he started to get his motor back. got into form, got into classic Chocolatito with various of punches, body shots, and no, the commentators actually made it a pretty strong note about this. Is that that work rate would have been enough to take out probably Yafai in 4 or 5 rounds. It would have been a 112. That's always been the Achilles heel with Chocolatito 115. It was that plateau because he was hitting guys that were starting to get bigger. And we know Yafai, he's doing a lot to make 115. He could be a bantamweight, but he did enough. Like I said, he got the job done. 2 knockdowns, including a nice shot straight to Yafai to end the fight. And as much as I discount Yafai, as much as I don't think much of him as a fighter, I still have to give props to Chocolatito because at the end of the day, it's not always as good as, not as bad as your opponent. It's how good you can be against an opponent.
In response to Bronze Plumber's comments, taking more of an extensive look at this, Roman, he's now a 5-time champion in 4 divisions. One of the greatest fighters the lower weights divisions have produced. He's a Hall of Famer right now. But to Bronze Plumber's point, has he returned to elite level? I will say, for the record, in my opinion, this was a very good win, and the knockout was in the ending. The knockouts was sensational. The right hand that put your fight down. However, if he was to fight a rematch with Estrada, and for those who hadn't seen that first fight with Estrada, Juan Francisco Estrada, current WBC champion at 115 pounds, do yourself a favor and look it up on YouTube. It's an outstanding fight from back in 2012. If he was to fight an Estrada now, I would pick Estrada to beat him in a rematch. And if Rungvisai is right mentally, and he kind of posted a video congratulating Roman, and said he would love to fight him in a trilogy, and subsequently showed some videos of him putting in work with the axe, putting in work on the pads and on the bag. If Sri Sakat is right mentally and spiritually, I don't know if I would pick Chocolatito to beat him in the 3rd fight. So I'll put the question out there to both of you gentlemen. Is Roman, quote unquote, back? Has he returned to quote unquote elite level, particularly at 115, which if you look at the division as a whole, it is very, very strong.
I would say I think his elite days are past him. You know, like I said before, he's been around for a while. He's done, like you said, he's a future Hall of Famer, and he's done a lot. And you know, as he's moved up in weight, I feel like his fights got tougher for him, because his size just it doesn't translate, you know, as far as power and whatnot. So I tend to agree with you that, you know, Estrada and Rungvisai would both be the favorites in the fights with them, but I still think it would be interesting if Gonzalez is still motivated to, you know, to give it, you know, one last run, you know, at 32. Then, you know, I think he, you know, now he's a champion. I think he's earned that right, you know. Again, he's been knocked out 1 time, you know, and he's lost twice, you know. So he's earned that right. You know, he's done what he needs to do. He won this fight that he was probably an underdog in, and or maybe as far as the odds are concerned. And so, you know, they can do a unification fight for the belt. So I mean, Estrada's always wanted to fight him because he thought that he won that, you know, that very great fight that you mentioned back in 2012. And I think it would, it's a unification fight. Estrada's been on the zone before. It would be a great, I think, a great fight for the fans. Regardless who wins or loses or what happens. And then maybe the winner of that gets the the third match with Rungvisai. Because they've each fought Rungvisai twice.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
I would probably not do any when it comes to elite status, just because of what you mentioned, Mike, how deep that division is and who can hover around that division. We know it's a 118, but we know now in Inoue, if the money's right, can go back down to 115 if it means the Chocolatito fight. We know Estrada would love to have that second fight again. I would not put him anywhere just because of what we've seen. I would not put him anywhere near Rungvisai. Nowhere near Rungvisai at this point.
What about a possibility of him fighting an Ancajas or even a Donny Nietes, who's been on the shelf for a long, or even more so, the likes of the winner of an Ioka Tanaka bout?
If it's Kazuto, I would probably put him against Kazuto. If it's Tanaka, I would keep him away from Tanaka. But what you mentioned, Arcanias and Nietes, those are probably the fights I could see him doing, because those are pretty winnable fights for him, particularly Arcanias. To me, because Nietes does have a lot of skill, does have a lot of experience that could make a pretty good fight with Chocolatito. I think Arcanias would probably be the best bet if you're going to do a unification fight or a good fight at 115 for Chocolatito. Those would probably be the bellwether, the actual tests to see if he's actually back at this weight.
Say you, Jacob? The possibility of even say an Ancajas or Nietes or even the winner of the upcoming bout between Tanaka and Ioka.
I like all those fights. I think he could beat it in Cajas. I actually think I think people rate Cajas too much. I just don't see, I guess, what everybody else is seeing. Nietes would be a great fight. I mean, he's been around for a long time, and he's also a smaller guy that moved up. So I think that would be an interesting fight. He's very skilled, like Daniel said. But I like all these fights. Like, again, it's not, to me, again, I don't think Gonzalez is elite anymore. I don't think, no matter what he does, I don't think he's going to get back to elite. I think that comes with, time in the game and age, and, he's in the back part of his career. But I think there's a bunch of interesting fights there, and that would be great for the fans. And, again, if he gets blown out by, one of these guys or gets knocked out, then, he can make that decision to, hang him up, and call it a career, it was a great one. But as of right now, I just don't think that he's done as a fighter. I think he has, has that fire, and he wants to, try to make one last push. So, like I said, he's earned that, and I think as fans, I would be great. It'd be great to see, fights like that happen. Before it becomes way too late. I don't want him to, get knocked out, let's say 3 times in a row, or lose a bunch of fights badly, and then start to fight these guys, for paydays or whatever. Like, I don't want that to happen. But
and an interesting comment / question from official scorecard. It says, don't you have an impression that Roman picked up where he left off after the first Rungvisai fight, meaning that despite naturally declining at his age, the rematch with Rungvisai hasn't ruined him? Has it ruined him? No. But what the Rungvisai fight proved to me, official, is that as great as Roman has been, there's a cap. And really, there's a cap to all fighters, if we'll be honest with you. Well, if we're being honest, there's only so much a fighter can go. Roman, he was devastating at 105, devastating at 108, and at 112. Uh, Bowling these guys over. He didn't have too many difficult fights, but once he moved up to 115, facing these bigger, stronger guys, I know it doesn't mean much, but when you move up and at the weight, and if you're that small moving up that weight, the body percentage is telling amongst the little men, the little giants, I should say. And since he's been up to 115 pounds, fights of most of the fights, all of the fights really have gotten much tougher than they were for him at 105, 108, and even at 112 pounds. And um, you can only do so much. So when he fought Rungvisai, naturally bigger, naturally stronger, and the power was the difference with Rungvisai. The skill level plus the power, that's what gave Roman so much trouble. Um, Even in a rematch with Estrada, he struggled with him at 112 pounds, won in an exciting fashion. Estrada's going to be sky high, the strength and the power for and the skill for Estrada at 115. Same thing with an Ancajas, who's a pretty big dude at 115 pounds. He may not throw the variety of punches, but it's the strength and the power. That's the thing. Um, and even a Tanaka, who's a tremendous fighter. I know he's moving up in weight as well, but he's a guy who has a young body. He's probably more suited for 115 pounds than Chocolatito, even though he's just now beginning to move up because again he's a young guy with a young body. So to me it just proved that there's a cap for him, and he can only do so much and go so far. That's all that means for me, in spite of his greatness. Let's move on to another fight on the card: Julio Cesar Martinez versus Jay Harris. I wish Gus from Corruption and Boxing was here because he called this fight spot on. I'll go to you, Daniel. He kind of informed us that Jay Harris, though unknown, is a very good fighter, a very talented fighter. And in 2019, Martinez came onto the scene, uh, mean, hard little puncher who has a style that's hard, that's difficult to figure out. But um, Harris, particularly over the second half of the fight, he brought it. He gave Martinez arguably the toughest fight of his career. Martinez won by unanimous decision. I think it was a little bit closer than what the judges had it on the scorecards. But when you look at, if you're a real boxing fan, you couldn't help but enjoy this fight. I don't care what size these guys were. I don't care if they were 115, 112 pounds. This was an enjoyable fight.
Yeah, I was not able to catch the whole fight. I did catch the highlights. Yeah, that is what is great about the sport. Just a tale of two fights. Harris getting acclimated in the first half, and then the second half of the fight, just go all out, a highlight reel. I love this fight. Like, so I can think it's going to be tonight when I'm going to watch the whole thing now. But the highlights themselves speak of how good the weights. And again, another example of how people have to pay attention to the smaller weight classes, because the smaller weight classes for the past 5-6 years have brought in stellar performance after stellar performance after stellar performance, whether there's a title involved or not. And this is just another great example of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go to you, Jacob. If you saw, I'm pretty sure you saw the fight.
Yeah.
Your reaction to it. Um, could there be an argument made that as sensational as Martinez looked against Charlie Edwards when he won against Rosales when he won the title. Could the argument be made that Harris kind of exposed some things about him that we previously didn't know? Because again, um, Harris, particularly during the second half, I could be wrong, but I think there were some moments during the second half of the fight where he just thoroughly outboxed the champ.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean the fight. It was a great fight. I did see it, and it was a fantastic fight. Yeah, I mean, I think I think you mentioned it before. The scorecards were a little wacky. I think it was a lot closer. You have to give Harris some of those rounds where he did some good work. But I think still the right man won the fight in the end. And I wouldn't say I don't know if expose is the right word, but I definitely think that Martinez. He's a little machine. He throws a lot of punches, body, head combinations, but he does, he gets hit a lot, and so I'm a little worried about a guy that's that active, but that is, gets touched a lot, that gets hit a lot. What that's going to do to his fighting career. I mean, he's definitely one of the top guys, but I think he really needs to focus on his defense a little bit. Like he can definitely be countered and hit, and Harris was able to catch him, quite a few times. So
And lucky for Martinez, Harris doesn't have a bigger punch because he didn't. Lucky for him that Harris doesn't have the power that Christopher Rosales showed during their fight back in December, because the way that Harris was hitting him, if he had that Rosales kind of power, ooh, things would have got dicey.
well, sometimes it isn't even about power though too. It's just if you get hit in the right spots, let's point to the Deontay Wilder fight and the Anthony Joshua fight. If you get hit in the right spots, it doesn't take a lot of power to mess you up. So that just goes back to the whole thing I was saying though about I think his weakest thing, the weakest thing he has is his defense. I think that's the thing he needs to work on the most because he's great offensively, and he like I said, he throws a lot of different types of punches and to the body, to the head, those volumes. He seems to have a gas tank that doesn't end, and he'll just keep on coming after you. But if he does, fight somebody that can have bring a little power, or hit them in the right spots, and pick their shots, then he could find himself in trouble. And I think I think it was a Rosales fight, and if I'm not mistaken, there was some moments where he got a little buzzed. So he ended up winning that fight, but he's definitely shown that he can be buzzed. So that's the danger when you're a guy like him that's as active as he has been. Sometimes you can wear the tread on the tire a little bit too fast.
Yeah, in that Rosales fight for sure. I think it was either round early in that fight. I can't remember the particular round where Rosales made Martinez's legs do a dance for a second there. Official says in the chat that Harris did a great job when he was countering him with compact punches and combos whenever Martinez opened up. You're absolutely right about that. Very, not just tough, but he was very smart and skilled. I think different scenario, different time period, or gets another guy at 112 pounds, I could see Harris winning a world title, particularly if that world title opportunity came in his home area of not even just Wales, but anywhere in the United Kingdom. I'll go back to you, Daniel, and you can follow up, Jacob. It's interesting with Tanaka moving up. Where does Martinez go from here? He says he wants to dominate the division at 112 pounds before eventually moving up to 115. Where do you see him going either at 112 or eventually at 115, which we talked about before, a loaded division.
This is gonna be an interesting thing to watch because I would say like Cabin handle his business, take care of any mandatories that you have. But we know 115 right now, as far as the little guys, is where the money's at. And sooner or later, I would not. It would not surprise me if later on this year that's a decision to make, because you don't want to get trapped in a position that Inoue was actually trapped into it, where you lead the division, and as the division starts getting hot, because sometimes that gets really, really dicey, and people will think that you're ducking other fighters. But at 115, like we mentioned, it's a murderous row in that division. And any of the fights that you can get at 115 with the zone would be great to see. I would love to see. Granted, this would catch the power version, the power dynamic that Jacob mentioned. Martinez Ronvasai at 115. I want that fight.
For those who are watching this live on YouTube in particular, please make sure to hit that like button. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Official says he had the impression that Julio's work rate dropped in the second half. He seemed tired, but showed a good poker face. It could be the result of a quick turnaround. Official, he just fought December 2019. I think December 19th, December 20th, like that, so in that range to win the title. I know he's a young guy, but to run it back in this quick fashion, the result of that may have caused the fatigue in the second half of the fight. I agree with you, by the way, that Martinez work rate did dip throughout the second half of the fight. He wasn't as consistent with his activity. He fought more in spurts over the second half of the fight, and Harris took advantage of that with jabs, with combinations, and hustle. I go to you, Jacob. Where do you think Martinez will go moving forward? Will he try to seek a fight, a unification bout against a Delakian who holds the WBA belt, of Muthalane, the South African IBF championship? Or do you think he will, or maybe an Angel Acosta, who's moved up from 108 to 112 pounds? Where do you see him going?
I see that if he can get the fights, he could stick around and unify. But I think Daniel's right. The names are at the next division up. So if you're talking about money and names to put on your resume, that's I think where it's at in the loaded division. But I for one, Martinez versus Rungvisai, I think Rungvisai would kill him because of the size. If Martinez is getting buzzed down here at this weight, Rungvisai is a very hard puncher at. I mean, he probably doesn't even belong at 115. He probably belongs in another weight class above, but he's campaigning it here for right now. But if he can get those fights, I think he wants to stay active. He's young.
Do you see the? Excuse me for interrupting, Jacob.
Yeah.
Do you see the potential of a Magia situation where he just made this big splash on the scene, but the more you saw him fight, the more you saw liabilities and weaknesses in his game?
I wouldn't go that far. Magia's a tough kid, and he has a defensive problem also. But Julio Cesar seems a little bit better than Magia. I think Magia came around at the right time, and maybe we were rating Ali a little bit higher than we should have, and so it made it look like this guy came out of nowhere and just kind of did well, but then he's struggled. But Martinez is still, I think, a lot more skilled than Mugia. Mugia is very just kind of like one speed, one kind of is kind of one dimensional to me. Julio Cesar Martinez has a little bit more to him, but that's just me.
Now let's move on to the main event here. Mikey Garcia fighting Jessie Vargas. Going back to you, Jacob. Okay, Garcia won, but I wasn't impressed. Uh, he had some difficulty getting to Vargas early. His power eventually showed through with the right hand, but I didn't like the fact that he didn't use his legs enough. I just don't know. It just something seemed off with his performance. I was not moved by what I saw, and I'm watching this. I'm like, okay, if he's talking about he's wanting a rematch with Spence, Spence will wipe the floor with him again. Um,
Well, we don't know
they're
that though
talking about
because
it's.
Spence hasn't come back from his accident. I mean,
I'm just
maybe
going
you're
to.
not booking it.
I know it's a big leap to assume, but I am going to assume that the Spence that we see come back is going to be something similar to what we saw before. But to my point, I don't see him beating the elite guys at 147 pounds. In real talk, if he fights a Josh Taylor or Regis or even Ramirez at 140 pounds, that Mikey Garcia, that's not going to do it either.
I mean, it was a close fight. I think Vargas came out very strong and very quick, and I think he put the early rounds in the bag on my card. But then he got caught and he didn't really recover. You can maybe give him maybe one or two rounds towards the second half of the fight, but um, with the knockdown, and that basically won Garcia the fight. I'll agree with you. It wasn't an inspired performance, but we have to also remember this is his second fight at welterweight. I mean, he moved up from two weight classes from a lower class, and that's where he did his best work. There's going to be some adjustment here. I don't know. I agree with you. I don't know if he is elite or the best Mikey at this weight, but if as long as he keeps on winning, then I gotta, again, give him the shots. Um, Even though his Spence performance wasn't what I expected it was going to be, he still stood up. He still stood up to Spence, and Mikey has a lot of belief in himself, and I think he's just looking for big names at this point in his career. And he's just looking to challenge himself. Some of these guys, probably think that nothing can ever happen to them, and until it does happen to them. So, but I think I think the Taylor fight would be an interesting fight, but I actually think he beats Prograis. Mikey's he's kind of cerebral guy. He's very economical with his punches. He's very patient. Even when he had Vargas hurt, he didn't. It's not like he just went out, crazy wild. I mean, he was very patient and trying to, land the right punches. And I think percentage wise, he topped the Vargas there. And I've never really had a lot of stock in Vargas. As far as like him being a great fighter, but he is a former champion, and he did do good the first part of the fight, but once he got caught, then it was kind of over at that point. But which is surprising because Mikey is coming up from two weight classes divisions, and Vargas has been hit by some bigger punchers. So that's kind of I guess encouraging that Mikey still has some power up at that weight.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Your reaction to what you saw. Am I being a little bit too harsh on Mikey here?
Yes and no. Yes, in a way, because we don't really know how Mikey can really fare 147 because he went into the deep end of the pool pretty fast, and we don't know how he can handle against the lower weights. But At the same time, I said it last week, I don't really have a high opinion of Jessie Vargas. Like, to me, like, he is a good fighter, but he has gotten a lot of gift decisions in his
And he's
career.
getting paid like he's an elite fighter. I mean, $1 million a fight he got paid for a couple fights back. That's ridiculous.
Yep, that leaving to that area. And to me, the main thing what happened with Mikey is he's still trying to get used to this weight. Because you have to get used to your body adjusting to a certain style. That's why he probably looked a little bit slower. His legs weren't as good early on, but this was a good run to see how the weight is actually impacting you against mid-level competition. And he did fairly well. And honestly, the power dynamic was always going to be the question around this weight. And it showed a little bit, and he proved that he has a little bit of power at welterweight. But the question has to be, at this point, if you are waiting this long to take out somebody like Jessie Vargas, should you even? I know there's a bit of pride about, but should you even consider the rematch of specs? Or worst case, we mentioned that he did one, like I said, a fight with Manny. Manny would probably be the more reasonable option. But I'll admit, he did what he was supposed to do. And he did it against an opponent he was supposed to do it to.
And to your point regarding Manny Pacquiao, there's a video that was posted on social media today. We're doing an interview with a local news outlet in the Philippines, and he was asked about who he would like to fight next. And the two names that he mentioned was Mikey Garcia, as well as Terrence Crawford and Frank Warren. Not Frank Warren, but Eddie Hearn, after the fight, after Garcia's win last week, was talking about a potential fight against Pacquiao in Saudi Arabia for the summer. So we'll see where he goes. And again, I could be overcritical here. I just had to be honest here. I was not that impressed with what I saw, particularly when you could consider who he was in the ring with. But that's just me. Folks who have a different opinion, you're welcome to have them. We'll move on to some news here. Last week we talked, Daniel, about Fury's win over Deontay Wilder, and we mentioned how more than likely Wilder will exercise a rematch clause, and we will see him in there for a third time. I question whether he should exercise that option because of how he got beat up so bad in that rematch. Well, it looks like that Wilder not only exercised the rematch clause in that, but we will see that rematch sooner than later. Yes, hand history of all Pac said spent. Oh, okay. Well, the interview I saw, hand history, he said in an interview that I saw, hand history, in the chat, he said that he wanted Crawford and Mikey Garcia. That broke today via Philippines. So I may post. I don't know if the chat will allow me to post the Twitter feed, but he did say that. I know that for sure. Back to the point of Wilder Fury. It looks like that not only will Wilder exercise the rematch clause, but we will see that rematch sooner than later, as early as July. Your reaction to it, and do you have concern that Wilder is wanting to run it back so quickly without any tune-up fights?
Well, first, he kind of had no choice because that was actually in the contract details that if they exercised the rematch clause, it had to happen by July. So this was a situation where he had no choice as far as getting tune-ups to exercise the rematch clause. But I will commend Deontay in a way where he did do something that we thought he wasn't going to do. He actually said he was not going to fight Mark Whelan, even though we all thought that all evidence was going to point that he was going to. And that actually can speak volumes to what he's going to do, because maybe they did have a discussion and maybe they realized that Mark Whelan did what he had to do for Deontay's own good. And that's mainly what balanced into it. Now, as far as coming back so soon, yeah, that's a little bit concerning to me, because that type of fight, that type of equilibrium, is not so much the physical damage, it's the mental damage. How is Deontay mentally when it comes to doing this fight? Because are we going to see what happened with Sergey Kovalev happen with Deontay Wilder, where we saw with Kovalev, as soon as that aura of invincibility was lost on Kovalev, he just was not the same. Even when he had good fights and he had improvement, like so with Buddy McGurk, he still wasn't the crusher anymore. Is Wilder going to have that same situation where, okay, you lost the fight, and now it's a situation where you're no longer the bronze bomber anymore? That's the volume that I need to go through into it. But as far as the timing, like, it's in the contract. He had no choice as far as the timing, and it's probably for a reason. It's so that whoever lost the fight would not have enough training time, and to pretty much capitalize on the popularity of the fight.
Your reaction, Jacob, to the third fight between these two happening apparently so quickly?
I mean, Daniel hit a lot of good points. I mean, I expected Deontay to do that, to do it quickly. Because I think he believes in himself, and he thinks that he can win that fight. So he's not thinking about all the stuff that we're talking about, as that, oh, well, you got beat down and you got outclassed, and he's very one-dimensional, blah blah blah. That's not how he's thinking. He's thinking like, he's using excuses. Oh, the thing was, the suit weighed too much, or I got caught, behind the ear, or whatever. All of the excuses that he's going to think, and all his team that they're going to tell him, to basically tell him, oh, I can win this fight, so why not run it back? And you don't also part of that is that you don't want you to get left behind when you're at the top of the division. If Fury goes and fights someone else, and maybe Fury loses that fight, and then like whatever, and then they do a rematch or whatever, there's a lot of things that can happen when you don't exercise what was in the contract. I mean, it was in the contract for a reason, because there was a chance that he could lose, right? And it's going to be a big money fight. I mean, this was a big money fight, and this is going to be the third one's going to be a big money fight. So everything on for him is positive, whether we think he's going to win or not. As far as what he's going to make in money, what the potential to gain the belts back, the potential to get revenge, all these different things. That's what he's looking at. So I'm not surprised.
Going to run through these topics quickly, because I know Jacob, he has to dip out early, so I'll go to you on this topic right quick, Jacob. Daniel kind of made a comparison between Wilder and Sergey Kovalev when he's discussing Wilder Fury 3 that looks like it's going to happen this summer. Speaking of Kovalev, news broke via the Los Angeles Times that the Crusher is going to return to the ring April 25th Fantasy Springs and Indio to fight Sullivan, Barrera. Your reaction to that, given the seemingly downfall, uh, downward spiral from Kovalev, the loss to Canelo in November, um, him contemplating retirement afterwards, complaining about the fight that he was essentially put in there too quickly against his own will, him talking about moving up to cruiserweight, the recent arrest for DWI, the fact that he has a hearing on April the 8th, and yet he's planning to fight apparently on the 25th of April. What say you about this?
I mean, he's we talked about his decline, but his personal life is a mess, and I mean, again, I don't know the guy personally. I've met him one time, whatever, took a picture. It was actually at that Sullivan Barrera fight when he beat Carroll Murat to become the mandatory for, I think, his IBF belt. But I mean, all the things that he's done, the comments he made about Stevenson, stuff that he said to Shields, he's been linked to alcohol before, like he has a problem. Well, obviously he does. He got a DUI. He's talked shit about John David Jackson, and he's saying that he got forced into these fights. Like, it's just all excuses, And I just, at the end of the day, it just seems like he's just not that good of a dude. Like, that doesn't mean he didn't have skill. Didn't mean he couldn't fight, but he just doesn't seem like a real good dude. He just seems like he has, call him demons, call him whatever you want, but he's not being responsible. He's not being accountable for his actions. It just seems like there's one excuse after another, and he's having that fall from grace, where he was before. But it's hard to have a lot of sympathy for a guy that keeps on doing things that he's been doing, or at least been being accused of. I know he hasn't gone to trial for everything, but I don't know, the Crusher could be going to the clink pretty soon.
At the very least, when it comes to Kovalev, the cat got issues, Daniel, and your thoughts on this supposed upcoming bout against Barrera. Desperation mode for both men. Barrera has lost 2 of his last 3 bouts, and we just detailed the issues with Kovalev, both inside and outside the ring. Your reaction?
This is pretty much, I think, like Gail mentioned it when we were talking about this last news, like a loser leaves town type of fight. Both of them are pretty much at the end of the rope as far as this weight class is concerned. But I have to mention it, talking about like what when we talked about Wilder, Kovalev's mental state after losses seems to be very, very deteriorative in a way, where he's not focused 100%. He has to find excuses. What does John David Jackson have to do about this situation? He's no longer a trainer, but he Vargas. And the situation, obviously, with the drinking, obviously, with the issue with the allegations of hitting women. There's a lot in that plate. And, of course, like hearing about going to cruiserweight, if Canelo dropped you, when you were technically the bigger guy, what are you going to do to guys that are 25 pounds bigger than you?
And for the record, according to the LA Times, this bout between Kovalev and Barrera is going to be contested at a contract weight of 180 pounds. Proceed, Daniel.
Well, they can't do much of it. They're not going to be involved for any titles. So it's like a pretty much a loser leaves town area. What I find more interesting is so soon you're going to try to make this fight right after, like I said, you have a hearing for DUI, and legally sometimes you got enough clout, you can try to use that to either delay the hearing or just get a slap on the wrist. But it's just a tough situation to look at. I get like he wants to fight, he needs to feed his family. So same thing with Salambera. But this is pretty much a fight where whoever loses, there's no room for them. Like neither of them can. Like I said, cruiserweight is not an option for neither. Going back down to super middleweight, it's probably not an option for either of them at their age. So I'm kind of sad at the same time, but then you know what? Like you mentioned, main events. Who is probably going to be co-promoting this fight, even though it's like a Golden Boy event. I'm glad at least they're putting up a card because it's true they have not put cards in months, and I'm really surprised by that.
Any more news stories that you guys want to squeeze in before we preview fights? And just a note, we're going to only preview one fight this weekend because the boxing this week is pretty light in terms of there's a real lack of significance fights. So I'm gonna let you guys give you guys opportunity to squeeze a news story that you have in mind or something you want to talk about.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, there's nothing much here other than like said the white stories. Like I said, accusing injuries from not taking the fight again. Nothing really like of significance right now when it came to the news.
Well, other than Dylan White, it was announced he's going to fight Povetkin. I want to say in May, Joshua Pulev. That's official now for June the 20th, I believe. I can't remember the location as of right now, but they announced yesterday that fight's going
England,
to
right?
happen. I can't remember where in England.
I think they said that it's going to be England.
Yeah, it's the UK.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember. I knew it was in the UK, of course, but I just couldn't remember specifically where in the UK. Let's move on to preview the one fight for this week. Fight's going to take place in Manchester on the Zone. As you mentioned, how Kovalev and Barrera is a crossroads fight. I would argue that this fight coming up between Scott Quigg and Jono Carroll is also a crossroads fight for each guy to remain relevant and to get a potential world title opportunity at 130 pounds. Uh, Under the radar deal, but still has some significance and has some meaning. Quigg, a former champion at 122. Carroll gave Farmer a tough go in last year when for Farmer's then IBF title at 130 pounds. Jacob, Daniel, any thoughts on this fight? Or are you just going to watch it just to watch it?
Well, I mean, it's funny how, Quigg at one time with his Carl Frampton rivalry, even though he lost that fight, he had done some good work in there. But he kind of just, I don't know, he kind of went into obscurity a little bit. He fought Oscar Valdez, but he came in way overweight in that fight. And
it was a good fight, though.
It was a good fight,
he broke
but
his jaw. I think he broke his. Did he break his jaw in that fight or something like that, or some kind of
he
injury?
had a broken nose, and Valdez got a broken jaw. So
okay,
I mean,
you're right. You're right.
I agree. It was a great fight, but it wasn't really a fair fight in the sense that he had one guy that was way. I think he missed it by like 6 pounds, something crazy like that. He missed weight by a lot. And so he wasn't even eligible to win the thing. But credit to Valdez, he still took on the fight. He suffered for it. He got a broken jaw for it. Because he's fighting a much bigger guy. But I think even Quigg was supposed to be on a couple cards here in the States. And I don't know, he was taken off at the last minute. So I thought I'd get to see him, because I didn't get to go to that Valdez fight. But I think he has some skills, but again, still sharp and still. So he hasn't really been active and fighting the best fighters. He didn't fight at all in 2019, and his last fight was in 2018 in October. So he's been on the shelf for a long time. I think possibly because of injuries, but I expect him to beat Carroll, but it'll probably be a pretty evenly matched fight, and they'll both have their moments. But I'm gonna go with Quigg on this one.
Yeah, quickly your thoughts, Daniel. Or are you interested in Huey Fury fighting on the undercard?
I'll be interested if I'm drunk enough, but no, not really when it comes to this. Not really when it comes to like that type. But Quigg, I like Quigg. Like he's a good fighter. Like he can bring it. The problem is he needs the discipline. Like Jacob mentioned, coming in drastically overweight, come to the fight, and then pretty much, yeah, almost like he dropped off the face of the earth for a while. Like I'm surprised that he's actually fighting now. It wouldn't surprise me if he pulled out again, because Jacob mentioned it. This has been an issue time and time again. Now, when it comes to Quigg, and you can't really do this at 130, where there's some pretty decent fighters out there, and obviously there's other fighters that they're trying to position, like Tank Davis are trying to position to be a superstar. You can't really be out of the loop when it comes to this.
I'm gonna give you. I know Jacob, you have to leave early, so I got one more story to talk about with Daniel. I'm gonna leave that up to him. Him and I. I wanted to get you up some time so you can catch the train home. So I'm gonna let you go now. For folks who want to talk boxing or movies, let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. And I can be found on Twitter, JRATM23. And that's where I usually tweet about boxing or movies. Sometimes I guest on a few different podcasts, Wrong Reel, which is a pretty popular podcast, and Film 89. I also do some writing for them on some movies, but you can check those out.
Oh, again, and I hope to have you back on next week. And I'm gonna give you an opportunity to dip out now, so you can catch the train home from work. One more story. I'll talk to you with Daniel at the behest of Hans History Vault. He asked to talk about the fight between Lomachenko and Teofimo. About why the hold up for that bout. Could you answer his question, please?
Well, probably a lot of the holdup is the fact that you want to position it at a certain time, because it's a pretty interesting unification fight. Obviously, it shouldn't take this long if you're looking at the contact. It's just both of them promoted by Top Rank. But to me, probably the situation is you need to find a good time for both. Because obviously, early on, all the hype was about Wilder Fury 2. And now we know the fight is in July. We can have the hype about Fury Wilder 3. So that could be easily dominated. You need to have a time where that fight of that significance, a unification fight at lightweight, would take center stage. Right now, at this stage, April, that's obviously too soon. May, we know that's Canelo time. You could possibly do it June, but then June is going to be dominated by the NBA, NHL playoffs. July, we know that's Fury Wilder time. So probably August to me will probably be the best bet when it comes to this. And it also, like I said, it gives ample time for whichever venue they pick out, and most likely it's going to be in Madison Square Garden.
One more thing that kind of just popped. One more thing that just kind of popped in my head. Tank Davis on Instagram posting an image of him and Leo Santa Cruz. The implication is that they're going to fight each other. There are some news outlets. Coppinger from the Atlantic has picked up on it and said that their negotiations are taking place. Thoughts on apparently Tank Davis fighting Leo Santa Cruz later on this spring?
What wait? What wait? That's all I need to know. Because if it's a
I'm
lightweight, could it be a lightweight?
I'm guessing 30, because Santa Cruz just moved up to 30. You think he's gonna move up automatically to 35?
We've seen Mikey do it, and I would probably though say 30 because this is going to be an interesting dynamic. Because we know Leo Santa Cruz is one of Al's favorites. We know he's one of Haney's favorites, and Tank is the one that Mayweather Promotions, from a business standpoint, are trying to make their next marquee guy. Obviously, after they had a couple of guys, but like shout out to Jake Leon Love for doing that, or other guys just got a bad look at the draw. Shout out to Bobby Jack for getting that crap. But this is going to be an interesting dynamic when it comes to this fight because I think they're going to try to find every way to make it competitive for Santa Cruz, and it would probably be a very interesting fight because it has to be something where you take Tank's power, but can he handle the work rate of Santa Cruz? Because once Santa Cruz's motor starts going, you know it's very, very hard for it to stop. So can Tank's power stop that? And more importantly, if it's a lightweight, whoever wins, can they position themselves now to be in the discussion for the winner of Loma Tiffin?
And I think we're going to shut the show down on that note. Want to give acknowledgement to Denise Wards, who commented on post fight. In the post fight comments, said excellent. Gave us some congratulations. Said excellent show. Um, Bronze Plumber, who was in the chat earlier here, he also had some comments now post show. He said, "Good show. It was inspiring to see Wilder be a warrior in the ring despite getting a beat down. It was embarrassing to later see Wilder be so biatch about his loss, spouting so. Let me read the thing in its entirety. Spouting so much ludicrous excuses." And then sacking the dude who actually put his best interest first. Update on that, as Daniel said while discussing Fury Wilder 3, he said that apparently that Wilder is indeed going to keep Mark Breland. So that's just a bit of an update. Want to give a shout out to Bronze Plumber, who was here earlier in the live YouTube chat. Shout out to Hans History Vault official. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Again, if you like what you heard, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Going to you, Daniel. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially as it pertains to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you.
First, you can find me on Twitter, Ruckers99, RAWKUZ99. Definitely catch up with the Heat stories and trying to build up the Miami profiles. A lot of teams, obviously. Like I said, I did put out an audio track last week about Inter Miami's debut, and the Heat just broke their own record, 22 threes, and they're winning against the Magic. They still be getting back in their winning ways. But definitely, I think on Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to have a pod. Hopefully, like John Fetch will be free by then, and then now we can get the ball rolling because while March is looking a little bit light, we know now that April and May is going to turn in pretty interesting, especially when it looks like the zone is going to try to force Canelo's hand with the Golovkin fight.
Shout out again to Hans History Vault. I'm going to read his final comment. He mentioned that Felix Alvarado, who has a belt at 108 pounds. I want to say IBF title at 108 pounds. Alvarado, by the way, who recently signed a promotional deal with Oscar De La Hoya. He's going to be on the same promotional outfit as his twin brother. I can't remember his twin brother names. He beat he just recently won the title at 130 pounds. His name escapes me. My apologies. Well, Fearless is going to fight DJ Carroll. Patrick Teixeira is going to fight Brian Castano. That card is going to be held on the 25th on the zone. Thanks for that hand history. Didn't mention it during the show. Appreciate the comment there. Mentioning here. For those who want to talk boxing with me, music, fitness, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76, as I said at the beginning of the show. If you want to check out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to. Also, as I said, new logos coming. I'm behind the scenes trying to create a new logo. I hope to get that out. Maybe later this week, if not next week, a new logo for Pound for Pound Box Report. So be on the lookout for that. And if you check the show out on iTunes, Spotify, any platform that carry RSS feed, make sure to look for the logo with the Pound for Pound Boxing logo with the Anchor logo. Along with that, I'm switching carriers for the time being. I am on Anchor now. So on the next episode, it will be mainly a preview show. We will recap Carroll and Scott Quigg, but more importantly, we will preview Shakur Stevenson, who's returning to the ring, make his first defense of the WBO featherweight title against Miguel Mariaga. Jessie Magdalena was me fighting on the undercard of that. We may talk James Kirkland. Why are they making him a main event? On the 14th. I need answers for that, Daniel. That makes no sense. What has he done to earn main event status?
Who did you just say is the main event?
James Kirkland.
Why?
This is my question.
Oh my god!
He's not even fighting in his home state of Texas. It's gonna be fighting on a Fox card in Maryland, Oxon Hill.
Okay, no. The only question that needs to be asked when it comes to James Kirkland is Van Wolf in his corner? If Van Wolf's in his corner, then there might be something to this. Because if that woman was not in his corner, would not give, in frank terms, 2 fucks about that fight.
So yeah, we may talk about those fights, but the focus of our show next week will be on Shakur Stevenson and Mariaga and Jessie Magdaleno. Luca, he's going to be fighting a guy by the name of Sakaria Lucas. So episode 284 is in the books. Want to give a shout out to Gail, who wasn't able to make it this evening. Both from Truth and Facts Sports Talks, as well as the lieutenant of Three Kings Boxing, Gus for Corruption and Boxing. I want to thank Jacob for joining us earlier on the show. For Jacob, for Daniel of The Inscriber, I am your host, Michael. This has been, again, episode 284 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Once again, give a shout out to everybody in the live YouTube chat for your comments and your questions. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night, folks.